over the New Orleans Saints 30-14. On the other side, you have the Panthers, of course, led by Luke Kuechly. They are the 9th best passing defense, and they are the 8th best rushing attack. And that's the big thing for me. Atlanta, they've got a great offense. When it comes to defense, though, they're just not that great. 32nd in opposing passing yards, 18th in rushing yards. They don't have anything else that jumps off the page. They don't have anything else that's really exceptional past their attack. I think that's an issue. I think the Panthers have a solid offense. I don't think it's anything out of this world. But you look up past the past 3 weeks, they got 41, 19, and 17. Then they had 31. Then they had 13. Then they had 17, 21. Those aren't good numbers. But the difference is 10, 17, 13. That's their opponent's numbers. In games where they are able to pull off the win, they have played exceptional defense. In games when they lose, they don't. So that's the key. Will they show up? Will the good Panthers defense show up? Of course, they are playing on the road, so let's look at how they did on the road. They won Week 1 against Tampa Bay 20-14 before losing to Baltimore, tying with Cincinnati, losing to Green Bay, losing to Philadelphia, losing to Minnesota, and then beating New Orleans. So they haven't done well on the road. They lost to Atlanta Week 1 at home, and now they're going into Atlanta. I think that is also something to look at, because Atlanta, of course, we know them for being a good home team. But wait, they lost their first 4 home games. Then they lost to Green Bay. They have only, they did not lose there. They were in Green Bay. The @ thinking about the Panthers there, but they beat New Orleans at home. They beat Tampa Bay. Then they lost to Chicago. They lost to Detroit. They lost to Cleveland. They lost to Pittsburgh. That's a lot of losses there. They beat Arizona, which was unquestionably a great win. They have a lot of losses at home. A lot of games that they probably should have won. It's a little bit of a... It's tough to call at this point. The same thing as the Saints. They just weren't the same at home this year. But I think this team has shown resilience over the past few weeks. They've had a tough schedule, picking up wins against Arizona, going into New Orleans and winning that game. They showed resilience against Green Bay. I'm going to go with Atlanta here. And I think it's a little bit counterintuitive, because I think the Panthers may have the better football team. And I think that the home field advantage may not play quite the same impact. It doesn't have quite the same impact as it once did. But I think Atlanta has found a way to win. They're able to pick up wins in tough situations. They're able to beat good teams on their best days. Arizona is a perfect example of that. And on their best halves, they're able to keep up with Aaron Rodgers. And that's never easy to do. Plus, Julio Jones, I think, is going to have a terrific game. Put the ball in Julio Jones' hands, and you will be able to win. That's all I got to say about that one. We'll see how this all goes down. I think there's so many different scenarios. And now, quick Super Bowl prediction. I'm not even going to waste much time on this, because I'm going to say exactly what I've been saying for the whole year, because both of them are still very, very well in contention. They've both solidified the playoff spot. Both of them will, in my opinion, be at home during at least part of the playoffs. I've got the Broncos from the AFC and the Packers from the NFC. Going all the way back to Brett Favre and John Elway. This time, get Aaron Rodgers and Peyton Manning. Interestingly enough, Elway was reaching the end of his career looking for a Super Bowl. Peyton Manning will be reaching the end of his career looking for a Super Bowl. Then you've got Rodgers and Favre. Both would already won a Super Bowl, and we're looking for another, both relatively young. And I think that Manning gets the Super Bowl. I think the Broncos win. I think a lot of people say, well, what about the Patriots? I have a lot of faith in the Patriots, but I also think the Broncos will make it. I think they lost that game. But preseason pick, and at this point, there's really no reason for me to go against it. We'll see how home field advantage shakes out in the NFC, or who the Broncos will play, and that could change things. But for right now, Broncos over the Green Bay Packers. Alright, so moving on to the next topic, we are going to go and head over to the NBA. Basically just got started, I guess. I think that people look at the season and say, oh, we're 20-something games in. The season, there are stages. There are the first 20 games. The games where you're really establishing yourself, figuring out who you are as a team. Then there's the middle 60, which some people really overvalue. But for the Bulls right now, just my team, this is their first 20 games still because they haven't been able to play together. Then you've got the middle 60, which are important because, home court advantage. But overall, they don't hold the same value. And then you get the last 20. For me, the season has hit that lull now, where we're going to go into a long stretch of good games with good matchups that don't really mean the same amount. It's unfortunate because you don't really need home court advantage anymore in the NBA. Home court doesn't guarantee you as much as it once did. So for a lot of the teams in the middle there, especially, Cleveland, they could end up as the 3 seed and still have a terrific shot at making it to the NBA Finals. It's all about the playoffs. It's how you play in the playoffs right now. So we're 30 games in for a lot of these teams, 29 games in. And a lot of these teams are already starting that point where they start wondering, okay, so how do we rest our best players so that they're healthy for the playoffs? Because at the end of the day, they don't really care how they do in the regular season as long as they're in the playoffs. As long as their good players are playing, they're not going to risk a regular season win for the health of their players, and I don't blame them. But that does take away some of the allure of a Clippers-Raptors game today, of Anthony Davis returning to Chicago, his hometown, to play against the Bulls, who have been playing great of late. A little rhyme there for everybody. But it's still fun. It's still fun to watch, and I have enjoyed this NBA season, especially in the Eastern Conference. Obviously, the West, we all know how great it is. So, I'll applaud them, give them a little clap. But give some attention to the East, too. I mean, you've got Toronto, Atlanta, Washington, Chicago, and Cleveland. 5 good teams. Of course, there can only be one best team in the East. You can't have all 5 of them. And it's been it's tough to call at this point. I would like to take out Cleveland from the mix. Cleveland is not yet a complete product, and they just haven't played up to par. Next up, we've got Washington and Toronto are the next 2 teams I'm taking out of the top. I think Washington is a great team, but they still lack that little extra. They lost to Atlanta. They lost to Cleveland one of the 2 times. They lost to Chicago. So they've lost to most of the top teams. I just don't think they're quite there yet. Over to Toronto. Toronto is an excellent team. Without a doubt, great team. However, they've lost to Chicago now 2 times. That you can't call yourself the best team in the East. Lose to Chicago twice. They've lost to Cleveland twice. And they beat Atlanta twice, though, however. Which puts them around the same point as the Atlanta Hawks. Who, in terms of beating other teams, they've lost to Toronto. They've lost to Cleveland. They lost to Toronto again. They did beat Chicago. But I think that was a very close game. I think Chicago has proven themselves. I think they still have the best team. And you look at how they've done when they're healthy. Atlanta's been healthy for most of this year and put up a 21-8 record. Chicago's barely been healthy, and they're 20-9. And to think that they're not done yet, and they're 9th in points allowed, 8th in points per game, 4th in rebounds, they'll probably remain in the top 10 in points per game. They'll probably even get better in points allowed, maybe get down to the top 5 even. They're great at rebounding. This is the complete team. I think if Derrick Rose stays healthy, I think the Bulls are going to make the NBA Finals. I think they're going to compete in the NBA Finals. I don't think we have a repeat of last year. This is a team with depth. This is a team that has Spurs-like depth. You look at the front line. You got Rose, you got Butler, you got Gasol, you've got Noah, and of course Mike Dunleavy isn't the best, but he's put up solid numbers. Second line. Second line is where they thrive because they've got so many options. Just go to power forward alone, and you've got Nikola Mirotic, and you've got Taj Gibson. Both of them are going to play. Mirotic, over the last few games, this is a guy who came in from Real Madrid. Highly touted guy. Really exceptional playing over in Europe. And his numbers thus far are pretty good. 8.5 rebounds, or 8.5 points, 5 rebounds a game, basically, around a block for a guy that, for the first half of the year, barely played. Then Taj Gibson got injured. People thought, oh, where are we going to get, our sixth man spark? Nikola Mirotic. The guy, he took off. Over the last few games, he scored 13 points against the Lakers, 7 against Washington, 12 against Toronto. The Memphis game was where he had his big game, 27 points in that game. 7 of 10 from the field, 6 of 6 from 3. This is a big guy who can take threes easily, and he will make them if you give him the chance. You've got Aaron Brooks. Once again, the Bulls bring in another point guard to revive his career, and the guy does well. 11 points a game. You've got Kirk Heinrich, who has been injured a couple of times but can come in when needed. Doug McDermott, of course, he's playing about 11 to 12 minutes a game. Tony Snell getting in there for 9. Etuan Moore has even picked up his numbers to 5 minutes a game. Not great, but they do what they need. They come in late on, but just in terms of the players that actually have an impact on the game, you've got a good 9 players and occasionally Doug McDermott to make 10 that are going to be playing every game a lot consistently, getting around 18 plus minutes a game, making an impact, scoring, rebounding, and I think that's big. I don't think you can find really another team right now, maybe say for the Spurs or the Bucks, that have that depth. And I know Bucks aren't a popular team, but you go through that lineup, they have a very deep team. Brandon Knight, Parker, the Greek Freak, Mayo, Ilyasova, Middleton, Bayless, Sanders, Dudley, and Zaza Pachulia all getting quality minutes in the game and scoring relatively well. That's a deep team, and they have, scoring-wise, one of the best benches. However, they still lack the starting lineup to really compete. But take, for example, Washington. Washington has Wall, they've got Beal, they've got Gortat, Paul Pierce, Nene, and surprisingly Rasul Butler averaging 10 points. The resurgence of Rasul, but past that, Humphries and Seraphin are getting a lot of time. They haven't really played how we expect. Otto Porter Jr., solid. You go down that list, though, and they have a lot of depth, but nothing that really stands out at you. You look what the Bulls do. You're bringing in Taj Gibson and Nikola Mirotic, both guys who could be starting on a couple of other teams off the bench. You just don't have that with Washington. You can't say Rasul Butler would probably be starting on another team. I can't accept that. Unless you're throwing him over to Philadelphia, or maybe, just maybe, he'll have to fight for a spot. Chris Humphries, he's good, and he can start occasionally, but you throw him to an elite team, he's not going to start. Seraphin wouldn't start. Otto Porter Jr. for me wouldn't start. Drew Gooden wouldn't start. Andre Miller wouldn't start. These aren't players who really would have a massive impact on an elite contender. Depth matters in the NBA right now. I think depth is big, and I think that really helps the Bulls to solidify themselves not only as the best team in the East, but as one of the best teams in the NBA. Now we go to the Josh Smith topic. Josh Smith comes in and the Rockets win a game, and now the Rockets are the best team. Rockets are so great, and this is, once again, the overhyping of everything. You get one win, and suddenly you are the greatest team of all time. in the media's eyes. I think the Rockets are a good team.